This week, we're talking about how to handle mistakes.
You are listening to Love Your Job Before You Leave It, the podcast for ambitious, high-achieving women who are ready to stop feeling stressed about work and kiss burnout goodbye forever. Whether you're starting a business or staying in your day job, this show will give you the coaching and guidance you need to start loving your work today. Here's your host, career coach Corey Lynn.
Hey, y'all. How are you doing this week? I am doing very well, getting very excited about being in California soon. Right now, we're in the process of packing up our house in Seattle, which I'm going to be honest is not my super favorite thing to do. I don't like packing. I don't like going through all my things and deciding what I want to keep and what I don't want to keep. And I get kind of anxious sometimes about like how I pack things and making sure stuff's like protected and that nothing will get lost. So definitely it's been an opportunity for me to use a lot of my own tools on myself and get some coaching from my own coaches. And it's interesting too, because moving away from Seattle, which is a place I've lived for a long time and a place I've really loved, like I'm really excited to move to California, but there is like that little tiny piece of my brain that's like, what if it's a mistake? Like, what if I don't like it? What if it's not what I thought it would be? What if California is way too hot for me? Like, what if I thought I wanted to be somewhere sunny because I've been in Seattle for 10 years, but then when I get there, I don't like it. And the truth is, like, I have no idea what will happen when I get to California. I can't read the future and I can't control it. But here's what I can control. I can control what I choose to think. As a coach, this is the tool set that I teach my clients, and I know very well that, yeah, when I get there, my unmanaged brain will have a lot of shit to say, and then I get to choose which of those thoughts that I want to keep and which of those thoughts I want to revise and turn into something different. And that's one piece. But I think the other piece, and the piece I want to talk about today, is even if I get there and like chose my thoughts, but then decided like, okay, it's not for me. Like, even if I got to the point at which I thought like, oh, this was kind of a mistake, or like, oh, like I thought I was doing something that made sense, but turns out like now I have this new information and I don't feel that way anymore. So the thing that makes mistakes the most painful isn't even that we've made them. All humans make mistakes. Like, it's just a fact of life. It's part of what we're going to do. It's part of what's going to happen. But what makes them so painful is the story we tell about the mistake, or the story we tell about like what the mistake means, what it means about us, or what it means about the world. And a lot of times we have very painful stories about this. We have stories like, this mistake means I'm a bad person. This mistake means I'll never be successful. This mistake means past me was a bad person. This mistake means I'm never going to have the career I want to have. This mistake means I'm not cut out for this field. This mistake means any number of things. And those things we make it mean, those are very painful. And they make us not want to look at the mistake. They make us want to hide from it or run away from it. This is an area where I see a lot of people, sometimes myself included, turn to like numbing and avoiding behaviors, right? We're like, oh, I don't want to think about that mistake I made, so I'm just going to go scroll on TikTok for a while. I don't want to think about the mistake I made and the possible repercussions for it, so I'm just going to like go to happy hour and have a glass of wine and like pretend it never happened. Or like, oh, I don't want to remind my boss I made that mistake 2 years ago, so I'm like not ever going to bring it up again and just hope that he doesn't remember, even though every time I have a meeting with him, I'm obsessively thinking about it. And so I'm like kind of giving myself the experience that he's obsessively thinking about it, whether he is or not. Or like, oh, I did something that I'm perceiving as a mistake, and now I don't want to talk to this other person about it because I don't want them to judge me. And then I miss out on like learning that could potentially help me be better, help me be more aligned to my values. Like, I have a podcast. It's about feedback. It's about how critical feedback can help us become more of who we want to be and help us like up level our skills. And it can be in the exact blueprint. But if we're very concerned with like thinking something's a mistake and reflects badly on us, we won't want to get into that blueprint because we've made the mistake a symbol of pain. We've made the mistake a symbol of failure. We've made the mistake a symbol of our shame. And then we're not able to learn from it. It's like we take the learning that we could potentially get and we put it into like a hostage situation until we renegotiate the story we're telling ourselves about like the quote unquote mistake, then we're not able to access that learning. So this week I was like on LinkedIn, like you sometimes do, and I saw this post from someone that said, it's actually a Maya Angelou quote, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." And the thing is, when I saw this quote, it really touched on something I've been thinking a lot about and something I wanted to share with y'all. It's a concept I've been thinking about for myself as I grow and as I become the next version of me. And it's also something I think about for my clients as they become the next version of themselves. Like, there are so many things my younger self did, which is me, right? Obviously, I did when I was younger, that now don't measure up to who I want to be and don't measure up to the values I want to stand for. Like, I have different values now than the person I used to be had. And whether those things were like people pleasing or saying something without thinking it through or failing to speak up when something bothered me, there are so many things that I look back on now that I'm like, it's not that at the time I even thought they were mistakes necessarily. It's that now looking back, I have this whole new perspective about who I want to be in the world, and what kind of person I want to be and how I want to show up. And the way I was showing up back then through that current lens of what I want to be doesn't match up. But here's the thing, and y'all already know this, but we still worry so much about the past that I think it's really important to say it explicitly. I can't change what I did in the past. All I can do is find ways to do better now. And all I can do is keep finding ways to know better. Like when we think about that Maya Angelou quote where she says, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." All I can do is find ways to do better now and to know better now. I mean, as a coach, I can also change my current narrative about my past self, but I think it's important to call out too that I can also change how I show up now, whereas I can't change how I showed up then. Like, I can look at the past and say, like, that was a mistake and I was so young and dumb. I don't actually think that's helpful. But I also don't think, for me at least at this point, it's not helpful to look at the past and go, well, everything I did in the past was perfect because it's what I did. Like, that is a coaching tool that some coaches use sometimes and it's available, but I don't want to think some of what I did was perfect. I don't want to think that it was, good or right, or that it aligned to my current values, because it doesn't align to my current values. But what I want to be able to do is think like, yeah, I know better now, and that doesn't align to my current values, and that's okay because that person became this person. Like, I don't have to condone what past me did to feel okay now. And I don't have to condone what past me did to like learn from it. It's like a very subtle difference, right? Between thinking like I made a mistake and that makes me a bad person. That's going to wall me off from the potential learning, versus thinking like I made a mistake and I can learn from it. Or even like, we don't even have to call it a mistake. Like I was saying, like I made this choice when I was younger. I would not make this choice now, and I can learn from it, and I can enjoy the growth that I've experienced, and I can decide what I want to do from here. Like for some mistakes we've made in the past, like we might, if we did something when we were younger and we didn't think it was a mistake at the time and now we do, we might want to like reach out and send someone an email and be like, hey, I see this really differently now and I'm sorry about that. We get to decide what we want to do now. But when we layer all that shame on, and when we make having made a mistake mean there's something wrong with us or that we're bad, we don't want to do those things, right? Because shame makes us want to hide. Shame makes us want to shut down. And that leads to another point. Like in my work as a coach, what I see is that judging our past self doesn't actually help us live up to our new values because, as I just said, shame makes us hide. Shame makes us shut down. Shame's actually not a good motivator. Like I think in our culture, it's very interesting because we try to shame people to get them to change their behavior. Like that's a cultural phenomenon that happens. But it's not effective. As a coach, what I see again and again with my clients is if they're shaming themselves, they don't change their behaviors. In fact, shaming ourselves often leads us back to the very behaviors we're shaming. A really good example of this is things like substance use. Like when people drink, like let's say I drank, I didn't, but in the past I did. So like there were times in my past when I drank like a bottle of wine and then the next day I would be hungover and then I would feel like, oh, I'm such a shitty person. I'm hungover. Like, what does this mean about me? Right. So there's like the quote unquote mistake with the judgment where we're making it mean something. And then I would judge myself all day long. And then by 5 or 6 o'clock, I'm tired of like spending all my time with this judgmental person who is me. And then I want to have a glass of wine to get away from that, right? So that's how judgment and shame can lead us back to the same behaviors that we're trying to get away from with the judgment and shame. So basically, judgment and shame, there's nothing wrong with them. You're always allowed to choose them, but they're not very helpful when it comes to wanting to create sustainable change. Like sometimes shame and judgment can create performative change, where if you shame someone, they'll perform a different action in front of you, but internally it doesn't work. Curiosity and compassion work a lot better. If we believe that we made a mistake and it means something's wrong with us, we're not really incentivized to be different because we think the problem's with us. Something's wrong with us. So then we're like, I guess I'm fucked. I may as well, comfort myself in whatever ways I can, get that wine back out. Whereas if we're like, oh, I made a mistake and it means nothing about me, it's something I can be really curious about, I can have compassion for myself and understand that all humans make mistakes sometimes, then we can be like, why did I do that? What was going on for me that's the action that I chose? What was going on for me that's how I showed up in the world? And then we can learn something. And then if we do want to show up differently, we now have information that can help us do that. Here's the other thing. I personally want to keep growing and keep evolving and keep changing. And that means that 10 years from now, like the me who exists 10 years from now, future me, she might have thoughts about some of the stuff current me is doing. The way I am right now, I'm trying as much as I can to live up to my chosen values now, but future me might have different standards and I might not live up to them. That's always the risk, especially when we're growing and especially when we're learning. And there's so much I'm learning about all the time that informs how I want to show up in the world. So honestly, it's pretty likely that future me is going to have standards and ideas that current me doesn't, but I still want to show up now and do my best at my current level, even though I plan to keep leveling up and keep finding ways to grow and know and do better. And if I spend all my time thinking about how like future me probably will think some of my current actions are mistakes, that's going to keep me paralyzed. And I just don't think that's the best service I can offer the world. I would rather show up out loud and do my teachings and do my coaching and know that I'm imperfect and believe that I still have something of value to offer and that future me can learn something from what current me does, even if she doesn't totally agree with every action I take. And the only other option is that I just don't take any actions, right? Like I said, the only other option is that I stay paralyzed. If all I do is worry about the standards future me has that I don't even know about yet and can't live up to, then I can't do anything now. And then I'm just stuck. And I also think that then I'm probably not learning as much because I think doing things and seeing how they feel and then being thoughtful and reflective with ourselves really helps us decide do I want to act like that again? Do I like how I showed up in that situation? Is that something I want to repeat or would I like to try something different? And here's the final thing I want y'all to think about, because I've been thinking about this a lot and it's really blowing my mind. Even if you do have mistakes, even if you do have fuck ups, if you have them in real time, it's different when we're looking at something we did 10 years ago, a little bit. Is it different? Maybe. Let's find out. Even when you have fuck ups, even your fuck ups can be awesome opportunities to live up to your values, even if they don't feel great, right? So let's think about this in real time. If you do something and then 5 seconds later, your brain's like, that was a mistake. If we don't make it mean anything about us, it's we can get that learning, but it's also just another opportunity to live up to our values. Who do I want to be when I make a mistake? All humans are going to make mistakes, so I for sure am. Who do I want to be when that happens? How do I want to show up when that happens? I want to be a person who can be curious and compassionate about the fact that I will for sure have fuck ups and make mistakes because I'm a human with a human brain with human capacities. And I want to allow my fuck ups, like critical feedback, to be data that I can use to become more of who I want to be, to live up to my values more, and to be better at my job, to be better at my relationship. Dr. John Gottman is this relationship researcher, and he teaches that conflict can be an opportunity for intimacy. And that idea, I read about it, 10 years ago, maybe. It really blew my fucking mind. And I'm in a relationship, I'm partnered, and this idea really helps me think about if Alex and I, my girlfriend and I, if we're having conflict, It doesn't have to mean anything's gone wrong. It doesn't have to mean I'm bad. It doesn't have to mean she's bad. It can actually be an opportunity for her and I to connect more. And that's kind of the same idea I'm offering you about this idea of like when we make a mistake. A mistake can be a chance for you to have greater connection with your values, even if at first it seems like you're having disconnection from your values. At any point, you can step more fully into connection with your values. And I think a mistake is a really beautiful opportunity to do that. And it's kind of like a next level opportunity to do that because it often doesn't feel good to step into your values about a mistake. Like I made one recently and I like texted the person, was like, oh, I made a mistake. And part of my brain, of course, is like, don't go over there. It's dangerous. It's bad. It's going to feel shameful. But instead, I want to turn towards it and go directly into it and admit it and be like, I want to make this right. Here's what I would like to do. And then they get to decide on their end, right? Okay. So to review, mistakes happen to all of us. I mean, they don't happen to us. We do them. They're part of life, though. They're part of being human. No matter how hard we try, we're going to make mistakes. And also often, if we're evolving and growing, we're going to look back on shit we did in the past, and it's not going to measure up to who we want to be now. And all of that can be something you make into a symbol of shame and feel terrible about. Or it can be something where you're like, yeah, that totally doesn't align with who I am and who I want to be. And it's okay. And I can learn from it. And how do I want to make amends, or how do I want to make reparations? What do I want to do now that I'm choosing to stand in this new value I have? Like, what do I want to do about the fact that I made a mistake? How do I want to create this fuck up being an opportunity for me to be even more deeply in my values? I think if you try this on, it will really revolutionize how you think about things you've done in the past that maybe don't align with your values anymore. And it's also going to allow you to show up more fully in the now, because you'll know you'll have a tool that you can use to be curious and compassionate with yourself in the future if you look back and think something you did now is a mistake. And if you love what I teach and you want some help taking things a little bit deeper and figuring out how this all applies to your own life, I've got good news for you. I've got space for a few new one-on-one coaching clients starting this month. So let's hop on a call. I'll give you some coaching right away to help you get going. And if it seems like a good fit, I will share with you how we can work together. Just head on over to my website and click on the Work With Me button and get started there. Also bonus, my coaching offering is totally virtual so as to better serve my global audience. And yes, I do work with people who are not native English speakers, and we've had great success doing that. There's even a testimonial on my website with someone in that category, so you can check that out on the testimonials page. All right, y'all, have a lovely week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Love Your Job Before You Leave It. We'll have another episode for you next week. And in the meantime, if you're feeling super fired up, head on over to CoreyLynn.com for more guidance and resources.